For some of you, this is going to be a little bit like watching paint dry. For some of you, this is going to be, that can't be. For some of you, this is going to be things that you wish you had known at some other time in your career. I am not a lawyer. I have been very active, as you know, Avis is very active in what I like to call a political junkie. We have sat through many nights, way into the wee hours of the morning, listening to arguments in the legislature. A lot of what you've got in front of me, fact is, one of the handouts is notes, if you will, and they're perhaps a little cryptic. Those are notes that I have written for different things with different sessions. The 85th legislature is not on there. There were only 4 bills passed on that, and they don't really affect anything we're going to talk about today. But my whole point is to you that a lot of these things people do is they simply either do it out of habit, or they do it out of lack of knowledge. They don't know what they don't know. Or somebody said one time, and they try to apply it that way. So some of the things, and I'm really guilty, and I apologize up front. I'm really guilty of just plunging through the material. If you have a question, stop me. If you have a question that's 2 slides down and you want me to back up, I am more than happy to do that. Just don't throw anything. Just raise your hand. I'll see you. So HOAs are very guilty of all the meetings. We've got one tonight if you want to come to it, 375 homeowners. The thing they love to say, more often than any other time, is they love to say, "You can't tell me what to do." Well, the Supreme Court of the United States said we can. There's a famous lawsuit. Typically, remember Texas was a country, so we have a lot of sovereignty laws. Typically, we pay very little attention to case law in other states. But there came a case back in 1999 out of New Jersey called Twin Rivers versus Greater Twin Rivers that went all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States, and the Supreme Court said, what was that? Oh, I see. The Supreme Court of the United States said, belonging to an HOA, the agreement that goes with it, and I'm going to explain that in just a minute, the agreement that goes with it binds you into a contract that belongs not to a club, not to a country club or Berry Creek or whatever. It's a governmental agency. These people can levy taxes, they can punish you, they can motivate you, and they can take your house away from you. Now, I've been doing this for a little over 25 years, and I've only taken one house from anybody. But if you live in Harris County, they tend to do it about 2,500 times a year. Wow. That's a little bit of a full contact sport down there. You paint your front door yellow, and they say you can't do it. Guess what? You just lost your home. That's a famous lawsuit way back in the early 2000s in Houston. The television stations picked it up. She still lost her home. Kind of an interesting argument. So if we start out, this comes directly out of the handbook from a district judge. This is their training classes. This is their definition. Let me clear one thing up before we go any further. There's lots of names for HOAs. POAs was kind of the original name people thought. It really not. Dates back to 1964 when in Houston they took an apartment complex, turned it into a condominium. They didn't know what it was, didn't call it that. They called it a common interest development, CID. So if you see something that's got a strange acronym or a strange series of words to it, if these people are acting in concert, like it describes here, either incorporated or unincorporated, owned by the members consisting primarily of owners, covered by the dedicatory document. Funny word, comes up over and over and over in Texas. For instance, I used a word a few minutes ago. Somebody was in the room about not-for-profit. We tend to call things non-profit. In Texas, we call it a not-for-profit. So here's your dedicatory document through the owner's board. Why is that word there? I don't know what that word's, why it's there. Or similar governing body manage, regulate the residential subdivision, planned unit development, condominium, townhouse regime, or other similar development. Comes right out of their handbook. That's what an HOA is, regardless what they call it. if they do these things in some kind of concert, if they've got documents, now remember that dedication document. That's going to throw a curve to you. So then people say, well, why in the devil would I ever want to live in an HOA? They tell me when to mow my yard. They tell me what color I can paint the front door. They tell me all these things. It's my house. I have rights of parties in possession. I have private property rights. I have all these things. Well, you've given them up. If you've agreed in that closing documents, if you've agreed to be part of a planned development unit, be part of a condominium regime, part of an HOA, there's different ways to address that, you have contracted those things away. The architect, or I'm sorry, the developer has some way to start to recover their investments. I've got an HOA right now, 794 homes. The developer has bought a $675,000 park for me to build, and I am starting right now to build that. That's how they get their money back. It's part of a debt retirement program. Comes out of that. If you belong in this HOA, if you belong to it, you don't have to buy into the pool. You simply can't use it. It's a $750 one-time investment. First calendar year after that, we prorate part of that. First calendar year after that, it's $150 for your family to use the park and the pool. If you don't pay for it, you don't have to use it. But starting in 2019, anybody that buys a home after that must pay that initiation fee to belong to that. Covenant enforcement, that's the biggest thing about an HOA. We tell you not to park on the street, don't park on the street. We tell you not to build fences 8 feet tall, don't do it. Now there are variances. You can certainly apply for those. We tend to be very reasonable. Under Obama, we learned a new way to say words called, I just went blank. I know the lawsuit, can't think of it. Reasonable accommodation. Reasonable accommodation really had to do under Obama with the criminal elements. I have a letter, if you want to read it, says back in April of 2016 that 33% of all American adults have a criminal record. Now, I don't even believe that, but he said that in the Justice Department memo and said that we have to be more lenient and we have to develop policies how we deal with criminals or people with criminal histories on renting our properties, on selling properties, on getting loans or whatever. So we have those policies. Anybody that does property management, I know Greg does up at the other office. I know you have to have those policies of how you accommodate those people. Reasonable accommodation has now exploded into people taking pet pigs with them on airplanes, peacocks, all this silliness that's kind of run its course, if you will. Some of that stuff is starting to draw back because it is so unreasonable. I just finished a 4-year lawsuit on exactly that. I'll explain to you in the next couple of slides here. Amenities and opportunities. After a period of time, you're going to hear me talk about this in a minute, after a period of time, it belongs to the members and not the developer. They have to back out, get out of the way. So the opportunities present themselves for you as a member or an investor or somebody that has a vested interest. In other words, I bought the home for my daughter to live in, that you have the say in these things. We are now building a clubhouse for one of those HOAs that we had a tract of land that was literally unbuildable. The developer just could not get anybody to come in and spend $80,000 on a high foundation. No one wanted to buy that lot, so he gave it to us to pay taxes on. Well, we as a not-for-profit, we said, well, that doesn't work for us, so anyway, we're building a clubhouse on it. Opportunities come in a lot of different disguises. This is simply one of them. Collective management, this allows you as the board of directors, and let me kind of reach real deep into a leadership class that I think we're going to do sometime in March. Leadership is a fascinating exercise because it can be described hundreds of different ways. But one of my favorite examples to use is that a board of directors is an elected body that determines policy. But for them to go out and to mow the grass in a large HOA, or for them to go collect the money, or for them to be responsible for the money, or to hire the sprinkler man, whoever does your sprinklers, or whoever does whatever, becomes really a strain because often these people have their own lives. They can have a job or a family or taking care of their elderly parents or whatever their life determines their needs are. So there is a provision in the property code for them to hire a management company. That's what I do. I have 74 HOAs that we fondly, inside my office, you can't say this outside of this office, we fondly in my office, we call that adult daycare. It's just crazy, some of the things you have to put up with. So collective management is one of the reasons that my company exists, that a lot of companies exist, and that's about the best thing I can say about that. Let's go to, by all means.
And I think it would fall under covenant enforcement, and something we've encountered several times is we have a contract, we have an inspection, we have exterior repairs that are only covered by the HOA. And how do we get that done within our contract? Because the seller can't sign that those repairs will be done. They can request it of the HOA. And what is a reasonable amount of time to get
What I am concluding, this is a pivotal question. What I am concluding is you're talking about a condominium regime or a townhouse where there is common owned, undivided interest, commonly owned property. So just simply, now this, none of you are going to like this answer, but I harp this over and over and over again, and I just finished, let me start over. I just finished the first, hopefully 2/3 of a lawsuit that has now cost my doctor $10,000 because he talked when he should have listened. Hire a lawyer to make that purchase conditioned by those requirements. The condominium regime, townhouse, whatever it is, there is not a party to the contract.
Right.
So you have to drag them into the party by going to an attorney to name them as a performance held by the vested member at that time. But get an attorney. Everybody says, we hear this over and over from one end of the country to the other. Who's going to pay for that? They can't afford an attorney. I'm the best I got to take care of these people. Don't do it. Might as well pull out your pistol, those of you that are armed, and shoot 2 or 3 of your toes off. Because this will hurt.
Yeah.
Hurt in a very serious way. The Real Estate Commission doesn't like it. The lawyers love it. And you heard an example with Scott that I know Avis has said to some of you, if not all of you, is there are a lot of attorneys out there that'll get involved in these kind of moments, whether it be contracts or whatever, just so they know there's a high probability that this will all end up in litigation, that they get a forced path now to make more money. It is the policy of the state, you know this, it is the policy of the state of Texas to encourage peaceful resolution. And yet attorneys will lay the groundwork for what is inevitably nothing but a spitting contest in a courtroom where somebody walks out of there writing a check, if not all parties. Grasp that concept, make it yours, own it, get an attorney involved, get somebody up front, make friends with an attorney, pick up their kids for after school, take them a bottle of good whiskey, do something to make friends with these people, just like you've done with your title companies, where you can call them and say, can I get a copy of a deed? Make friends with an attorney. Get somebody that'll help you with these things. This kind of advice becomes priceless, not the day you get it, but way down here at the end where all the train jumps the tracks and you're the only person standing and it's your fault. This is a lawsuit I just finished, 4 years. This lady, it's a nice, on Lake Belton, average price of the homes is probably in the 800s. We've got probably 20 homes over $1 million. This lady is just a wacko. I can't tell you enough bad things about her and what she's done over the last 4 years to us. Her daughter is just a spitting image of her times 2. And she testified in court that she would come to see her on average 14 times a year, stay no more than 3 days. How she found this out, we never did get a clear answer on this. She determined that if she had chickens, that her daughter acted more civil. Covenant says no poultry, fowl, or chickens. Now, the defense that the law firm she hired, which has already ran up a $250,000 bill for them, the law firm said that is not a definitive definition of a chicken. The word chicken does not define chicken.
You can't make this stuff up.
So we've been to federal court. They threw us out. We've been to Texas Workforce Commission. Does all of, who are the people that enforce civil rights? Not the Justice Department. The HUD people. The HUD people deferred it to Austin, and we had to go down there for a hearing at SOA. Both of those have been dismissed over a period of time. So then they dropped us into the district court, and we fought that out over a 14-month with, I've done 3 depositions, I've done a dozen interrogatories, and every time we just stood our ground. Chickens are prohibited. She agreed to them. Referred back to this Greater Twin Rivers case. Just really got ugly. Finally, the judge just had enough. Now, he's board certified real estate, residential, commercial, farm and ranch, pretty learned guy. He finally, he gave them every reasonable accommodation, quote, Obama, unquote, everything that he could hand them on this. We even agreed that if they had 2 chickens, which was a violation of our covenants, that we would agree to that. They said, no, it's 8 or none. We said, you could bring the chickens in with you, those 14 trips on average per year. So they said, no, we want them there because we never know when she's coming. We never could find a middle ground. Long story made short, he ruled in our favor. And in a minute, you're going to hear, at the very end of this, you're going to hear how bad this can get. Long story made short, we've ran up $180,000 worth of legal bills. She's still got her legal bills. We've got about $120,000 worth of fines that have aggregated over these 4 years. I'll explain to you how that we came to that. Right at the very end, there's a stinger that I'm going to show you about HOAs that very, very few people simply understand. So this is my favorite cartoon. I remind you under oath, are you a service dog? And it's a stinking chicken. So the question is, yes, ma'am.
I'm so sorry, but who pays your legal bills then?
Well, the HOA had to under special assessments, which she's a member.
So all of the homeowners have to pay more money.
And I assure you, if this lady drove over one of the curbs and down into the lake, which is probably a 75-foot fall, they would all turn their back and walk the other way.
Oh.
She's been ostracized. It's just crazy.
So she's costing all of the homeowners money.
And hadn't paid a penny of ours. Now, she may have paid her lawyer fee. I don't know. But we're just running a clock right now with her. Keep that thought. We're going to come back to it. So then the question is, okay, now, you know, when people have problems with us, they call Trek. When people have problems with the air conditioner guy, they call TDLR, Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation. When people have problems with mobile homes, they call TDHCA. Who do they call for HOAs? The courtroom. That's the only place you can solve an HOA issue. There is no one wants to do it. So my example to you is California took all their HOAs. We have about 8,700 of them in Texas right now. They took all their HOAs, probably 20 or 30,000 of them, and they put all of them under a lid called Sterling Davis. It's called the Unified Codified HOA, POA, whatever they called it, law. And they made everybody march to the same tune, to the same cadence, to the same most litigated piece of legislation you've ever seen. One size simply doesn't fit all. You are entitled, especially in Texas, you are entitled to have certain unique differences between your neighborhood and someone else's neighborhood. And I will tell you that's the compelling reason why some people are more likely, predictably, to buy in some neighborhood, Berry Creek, than the neighborhood that has exactly the same size home, the same year in a different neighborhood that doesn't have an HOA. There's value there, intrinsic if you will, but certainly there's value there that the USPAT people, the Appraisal Institute, will tell you brings a certain undetermined, you can extract it. Do y'all know what paired cell analysis are? Anybody ever get a bad appraisal? Call me. When you get a bad appraisal, I have a very close friend that is the review appraiser for TDHCA with the Real Estate Commission. He is the primary review appraiser, been a friend of mine now for 40 years. He taught me how to do paired cell analysis. And I'll tell you, when I get a bad appraisal and I am convinced the appraiser's wrong, you will win 99% of the time. And most of them will walk away. Paired sale analysis is the key to determining what some individual thing is worth, like an HOA. So, there's no agencies with oversights, only a sense of fair play, good neighbors, whatever that means to you. Go to church. Read this morning where they're taking all the gender. I don't know who that was, the Episcopalians or somebody, taking all the gender out of the, how do you do, oh Father, how you even start to do that? Parental unit? Is that what you say? I don't know where this is headed, folks. So your only solution is the courtroom. Who decides what and who controls an HOA? Long story made short, the declarant gets to start with it. They're the people that are on the hook for the money. They're the ones that go out and buy the land, or they'll do a joint venture with somebody, or they'll do some kind of participation agreement with somebody. You own the land, I can build the streets, I put in the sewage, and I put in the water, and I do all that, and then we share in the profit. Somebody's gambling. A little bit like Las Vegas, but there's no one-armed bandits. So then they decide how these things go with first the dedication, the bylaws or the organizational documents, and then they do the covenants, covenants, conditions, and restrictions. I call them CC&Rs. Policies are a new invention. 2011, the legislature pulled out of the rest of the agencies a trick. We do that. They did. I say we. Let me apologize. The Real Estate Commission does this. Most agencies do this. Is they have codified law. That means somebody proposed a law, somebody approved the law, they sent it over to the governor approved it, they signed it, they gave it a cooling off period, it became the law of the land. That's the law of the land. That's what laws are. But what they found was that things change from time to time. We can pass a law in 1948 that probably is very hard to apply today. So then they gave us the ability of what's called the Texas Administrative Code. And in the Real Estate Commission, that's what the rules are. That's what all those rules and their explanations and applications of the law and how they interpret them. And they can change from time to time, and they don't have to have anybody's approval except those 9 people sitting up on the dais. And so they say, we're going to change the rules and go from 5 days to 3 days. Or I always thought the earnest money was at your first opportunity. That's what it says. Why they had to, this is the dumbing down of public schools. My wife is a 29-year public school teacher, but I will tell you that the public schools now, what they used to could say in 10 words takes 200 words, and they have to repeat it 14 times. So now we have to explain to these people in long words what these things mean. Well, the commission can do that at their discretion in whatever words they choose. They have several standing committees. The broker lawyer I've served on, Avis has chaired it and served on it. They have an education group. We're about to start broker responsibility again. They've got these standing committees that advise the commission, but they certainly make the final decision. The legislature passed the laws, the case laws that come out of the courtroom, and there's lots of them. If you like to read that kind of stuff, you can't sleep at night, call me. I will send you a library of case law that will put you sound asleep. They are so boring and so long. There's one out of East Texas that's about 189 pages long, and it's over an argument of what to call something. If you read it, that's all it boils down to. I mean, they argue everything, but when it comes to the end of the day, federal laws apply to a lot of things, but they don't typically call theirs laws. They call theirs findings. That's what that reasonable accommodation was with Obama. That's what the thing about service animals was, and they finally kind of started to rein that back in a little bit. Findings are things that the IRS and the Department of Justice and the FBI and all those people get to crank out these findings, if you will, and they're not called laws, but they work the same way. You heard this earlier. Then it all boils down to who's got the best attorneys. Anybody know the definition of a jury? It's 12 people get to pick who has the best lawyer. That's how this works. Plain and simple. It's lawyers. I've seen really, really, really rock solid cases lost because somebody had a better lawyer, plain and simple. And you get what you pay for. I'm going to tell you, get those $700 an hour, tall glass building lawyers. Sometimes there's one in Austin. I had a case drug out for 17 years on an apartment complex that my guy inherited because he financed it for a guy that walked away. Took us 17 years. The city of Temple stepped in, seized it, evicted everybody, built a 12-foot fence around it, and knocked down 2 of the buildings in an apartment complex. Took us 17 years. We lost twice at district court. We lost once in the 3rd court in Austin to the appeal court. We lost once in the 13th court in Amarillo. My man spent over $1 million. I represented him this whole time, saying this is just flat wrong. We had a buyer. Scott and White Hospital's right next door to it. Perfect buyer. Knock it down, sell it to them. Couldn't do it. We're still tied up in litigation. Finally, he cranked in, he didn't have $1 million at that time, he cranked in $200,000. I put $50,000 of my own money. We got somebody to go over to Baker Botts, which is a famous law firm in Austin. Joe Knight got one of the ex-past Supreme Court Chief Justices to write the opinion for it. And most Supreme Court decisions in Texas will run about 12 to 20 pages. This one was 3 pages long. The style, the decision, and the signature on the 3rd page, reversed and rendered and said in the caption, "You lawyers don't know how to read." And we won the case. My man got all of his money back, plus the $8 million denial of access from the city of Temple, plus we sold the apartment complex, which was just in ruins after 17 years. We sold that dirt for $3 million, and I got both ends of the sale. That's how crazy having the best lawyer can work for you. That's my best example. So, people say, we hear this over and over and over again. I didn't get a copy of the covenants. I didn't know that. I don't know what you're talking about. Nobody told me. Well, guess what? This is a Texas real estate contract, and it says very clearly that they have to deliver within 20 days legible copies of covenants, documents, evidence, exceptions, other than the standard printed exceptions. Those are those 8 parties in possession, marital rights, oceans, whatever. But then at the bottom it says the buyer may terminate this contract if they get them and don't like them, or if they don't get them, they can get their earnest money back. Now they sign this. They initial the bottom of this ratification. They initial the bottom of this page. This is in our contracts. Over in the request for information, same kind of thing. It says within 20 days, whatever day you put in there, and after 3 days of receipt, they can object and then get their money back. TDI says to you in their manual, in section 4 of their basic manual, it says they must deliver all copies of all covenants. Now people pay us to send them over there. The title companies have the plant. They're the ones that have all the information anyway, but they still ask us to produce it, and we do, for a fee, mind you. But here's 3 different opportunities for the buyer to walk away or to say, I didn't know I couldn't have chickens. And guess what? So, long story made short. So here's the one that gets everybody. And this is something for you to notice. Somebody came to me earlier before the meeting started and talked about getting a whole big production of things. There are things you must have recorded. And it says they are only in effect if they are recorded. Come on. There it is, finally. Notice to all parties of the existence of the instrument and subject to inspection, if it's properly recorded in the county of venue. You take a, I don't care, a tic-tac-toe game and record it, it's out there for everybody to know. Now, I doubt the county clerk will record something as silly as that, but it must be recorded in the county of venue. If it straddles 2 counties, 3 counties, whatever, it has to be done. That's 13.002 of the property code, by the way. So here's, these are out of my notes, by the way. These documents over in, now this is my bad habit, but if somebody asks you to regurgitate whatever it is you may have heard me say today and you want to use your own words, don't trust my words. Go look it up yourself. Chapter 207.006 talks about availability of those documents must be available on a website if the HOA has a website. You've got to be able to get to them on their website. About half of them do that. Anytime you have a Facebook page, that's a website. And they've got to have them over there, or at least a link to them. Yes, sir.
And if you can look these property codes up online. If you want a hard copy of them, I have the book in my office if you ever want to use it as well. It's nice and thick.
And it makes real easy reading. Please.
My neighborhood has a voluntary HOA. 2/3 of the people do not belong to it. So what the other members try to do is, they had a meeting, they were gonna try to change the deed restrictions. I'll get to this point in just a second. You could not attend the meeting to vote on the deed restriction change unless you were a member. Yeah, I think they're off in la la land on this, but I want to talk to you later. But in this case, do these have to be published and available to anybody?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And just think of why. I'm a potential buyer of his home. He's in an HOA. You represent him. So you want me to buy it sight unseen that I can't have chickens? But the point about excluding people, I think that's a Title VIII violation. You're discriminating for some reason.
Later.
To answer her question that she didn't ask, can a neighbor in a voluntary HOA hold accountable someone that is a member of the HOA voluntarily accountable for parking on the grass? Absolutely. Anybody, and it'll say this in a second, I forget if it's up here. You'll see it in a minute. All you have to be is an interested party. It can be somebody driving down the street and say, you can't do that, and they can sue you. They don't have to be a Texan. They don't have to be a human species. They can still sue you by the sheer fact they're an interested party. Sir.
I got an email yesterday from title company that says there's a deadline issue with the HOA docs that we said 10 days. The 10 days means we need delivery by 2/14. HomeWise says it's 10 days from receipt of payment. So if we ordered today, it would be the 19th. Is that?
I got two answers. They're not related. One is this a peaceful resolution of a slightly irritating flare-up? Or does somebody want out?
I don't think, but I'm just, if it was a big deal,
I don't think, well, you'd have to show me where it's recorded that it's 10 days from payment. If that's recorded, then you can hold that in effect. But if I've just dreamed up and put it in my top right drawer, some rule 10 days from payment, it's not enforceable.
from the HOA management company.
Right, and I'll just tell you my contempt, and I've testified a number of times. You're more than welcome. You've already kind of figured out my style. I have a lot of contempt for the HOA management companies. They're not licensed by anybody. They are historically people that have criminal records. They steal at every opportunity. They charge. How many of you are paying? We charge $100 for a resale certificate and copies of all the documents. Anybody seeing 500, 1,000? And where does that money go? And how much does it cost? And then we see transfer fees under all kinds of different names, and those monies go to the title company. These people are just out there stealing.
And where's that recorded that we can know?
County clerk. Call your friend at the title company. Yes, ma'am.
Explain, because I'm having trouble understanding the distinction between when you get like deeds or deed restrictions, covenants or whatever, but there's not an HOA.
It's not an HOA.
So what's the difference between those things that are governed by the HOA? I mean, they're just as enforceable, correct?
Yes. If you're talking about a neighborhood that does not, nor did it ever have an HOA, but they still have deed restrictions or covenants about
Right.
open privies and explosives and whatever else we see out there, yes, those are enforceable by anybody
Okay.
that's
Not an
interested.
attorney is what we can hold.
Well, okay. If you go to here's one of my stupid sayings. If you go to a barber, is it pretty predictable you're going to get a haircut? If you go to a lawyer, you need me. There is a term. My mother said it wrong, and I struggle with this every time I try to say it. Pro se means you are representing yourself. And yes, you can do it. Now, the judges have a real low tolerance level when you get up into those formal courts, county court, district court, those places, for not having an attorney. So to have an attorney, sure. But if you go to the court as indigent or a pauper, they have to loosen the reins some, not a lot. We just finished that lawsuit. That was when it cost my doctor $10,000. She represented herself pro se. She got access to somebody's legal library and just papered the judge's office with motions. 46 motions in 12 days. The judge's tolerance just really was tried. And she was fighting cancer, and she didn't want to fight this woman too, and she finally ruled in our favor.
So I have a question on that. So if they have CCNRs and the developer implemented them when they developed it, but there's no HOA, if somebody is, say, building a fence that's against the CCNRs, you have to take them to court to resolve it?
That's the only place you've got,
Okay,
short of going over there and setting fire to the fence.
good to know.
I mean, I'm trying to be honest here. There is no body out there. Now, the city may have a permit, another layer of jurisdictional type stuff. But that's the reason the courtrooms, and most of these cases go to JP court. It's where they're all supposed to start. Not all of them go
But
there.
you could write them a letter and see if they would.
And you could hug them and take them a cake, but who knows what the results are going to be.
The neighbors to see who else had a problem with it.
I didn't hear you.
I also told them to ask all the neighbors and see who else had a problem with the violation, and then get everybody together to sign something and send all these people who have an issue with what you're doing.
Yeah.
See if that would happen.
And they basically said, sucks to be you.
Yeah,
You know,
We're
do
talking
what-
about two different instances.
Yeah,
That's
but
okay,
same,
but I mean-
same sort of deal though.
Yeah.
I mean, it's what it might, yeah.
get a lawyer. But you can do it yourself. The quicksand really gets between your toes fast, though, when you try to do county court or district court on your own.
I am not an attorney, I do not practice law.
Good for you. Answer number one. So, there's other things in here. You must have these policies recorded by 1/1/12. So you go back and you see these things. If you want to see what one of them looks like,
This on the table right there. The box.
here it is. This is, I have 74 of these. Here's what my policies look like, and they cover everything from improvements to satellite dishes, which you can't prohibit anymore. A lawyer wrote all this for us. Many of our articles, I think there's 18 articles in this one, say Texas law currently renders null and void any covenants that say, in a minute you'll hear me say, if you're not current on your assessments, you can't vote. A lot of them say that. Can't do that anymore. Now, if you're a member, a vested member, and anybody's welcome to read this, or I'll leave it and y'all can have it as an example. I don't know what, these are my notes. Very cryptic. I apologize. Going back to your question just for a second, no HOA, covenants, fence, those covenants, unless they say otherwise, have a 10-year lifespan. Those covenants, after 10 years, by state law, they just fall out. They can have language in there that says in perpetuity, or they can elect, or they can do a lot of different things to make them carry forward. But under Texas law, covenants in a non-HOA expire after 10 years.
And compare that to deed restrictions.
They're the same thing. Covenants, conditions, restrictions. CCNRs is a cheap way to say any of those things that regulate. Remember the hierarchy. You dedicate it, you create the organizational things, those are the bylaws, and down here's the covenants, and then way down here's that policy thing I showed to you. A lot of lawyers, I argue with this, I've testified against them, made them mad. Most lawyers do not record bylaws. I can't tell you why. They can't tell you why. But if they're not recorded, in a minute you're going to see you can't enforce them.
And what if you wanted to reinstate those after that 10 years? Would you have to have the approval of all the people in the...
Great
We're
question.
bound by
She's
them before-
she's reading my notes. She's a little bit ahead of me. 67% of all means all, everybody has to vote to rededicate and state and record those documents.
And that's whether it's a homeowner or a landowner.
A vested person, yes. You don't have to live there
You just have to,
to do all that. It's a real hard standard. I've tried 4 times and never done it. I can't get 67 people to agree. I can't get 5 of you to agree on the time. It's just that challenging. Here's where it says, some HOAs don't know a decade-old duty or mistakenly insist the organizational documents like bylaws and rules are not dedicatory documents. They are. It simply defies logic in a courtroom. I can give you the case law on this. Those bylaws must be recorded to be enforceable, period. Now, bylaws talk about meetings and board of directors and how you elect officers and just all that stuff. And there's where it's found in the property code. Okay, how do we change? This is where I was telling you how the declarant or the developer has to back out. After they sell 75% of the lot, 1/3 of the board of directors must be represented by people vested, and now that's been changed too, by people that they choose to represent the board. The board of directors can do that. I'm of the opinion, I'm sorry?
Who is the board of directors?
Elected by the body, elected by, up until the 75% though, it's appointed by the developer or their designee. They're the ones that make all the policy decisions.
The builder?
Can be.
And the builder?
Can be whoever's money's out there to pay for all that. Builders, you see builders, this is a joke from the 80s, you can see builders with a pickup and a CB antenna, and they're a builder, but they don't have any money. It's hand to mouth for them, but they got somebody that's got money that's gone out and bought that land, paid for the streets, paid for all those things, and that's where the money is. That's kind of a ghost writing type of a situation. Then there's those participation agreements I told you about earlier. He owns the land, I've got the money to pay for the infrastructure. When the developer sells 75%, 1/3 of those seats on the board of directors, and it doesn't distinguish lot sales from builders. This is the number one complaint we see. The developer or the declarant or the CC&Rs or the bylaws are silent on builders. The law is very clear. It does not, I did this in blue on purpose, does not distinguish lot sales from builders to home sales to consumers. Now, it can be preemptive. They can say builders don't pay initial fees, $1,000 initial fees, whatever they are in your community. But if they're not, that builder has to pay it. And the title companies will argue with you, but all they have to do is look up 209-00591, subsection C, and it spells it out just as clear as you can be. This is an argument we get virtually every day. Come on, hello. Well, that's interesting. It changed over here, but it didn't change up there. Okay. Yeah, it's gone too far now. Why is it slow? Ava was sitting in Houston, is she? Somebody from Houston's calling me.
She's in Tucson.
Any of y'all know Gerald?
Yes.
We'll all miss him.
Yeah.
What a character.
He was.
Oh, there it was, right there. So, how do you change the CC&Rs? Or the bylaws? Or any of that? That's explained over in 209-0041. It takes 67% of all unless it's stated otherwise in the declaration. I have tried this 4 different times. I have never been able to overcome this. Finally, the last one was a big one. We were going to put 2 lots together on the lake, build a very large home, 7,000-foot home. And so he built it on 1 lot. Finally, the legislature woke up in 2015 and said, well, that's wrong. They fixed that, and I'll show that to you in a minute. Change is very hard to achieve. Transparency, you talked about how do you get this word out? How do you do this? Every year, regardless if the developer's running it, If the board of directors are running it after the developer has exited the scene or mostly exited the scene, you must have an annual meeting. Very little of that, sometimes none of that, is actionable by the members. They all come ready to vote. Well, sometimes there's nothing for them to vote on. And that goes back to my description of leadership, where you bring in a board of directors to be the policy makers, much like we hire people to go to Congress, John Carter. We hire local state reps and local state senators to represent us. So we don't have to go down there and listen to all that, you know, that old saying about watching legislation is like watching sausage being made. Nobody wants to watch that stuff. And if you do, you get sick at your stomach. It's a sick person that stays up into the wee hours in the morning to watch that garbage. So you have to have this annual meeting every year, period. And if you don't have a meeting, the members can call a meeting and make those results known.
Bill, what happens if you have an HOA and it kind of goes bye-bye? It's not real active. Now they're trying to be more, I mean, they went away.
Well,
And now they're trying to get back.
in Texas, there's what we see, and that's what this meeting this afternoon at 3:30 is. We see HOAs that do exactly that, and they become inactive. Well, what does that mean? Well, here's what it means on the highest levels. You must every year file a tax return with the Texas Comptroller. Every year you must file a 1040H with the Internal Revenue Service. Every 4 years you must file an 802 with the Secretary of State. And if you have a management company or somebody that's acting, not a member, as in some managerial position, doesn't have to be licensed by the commission, they don't even have to have a driver's license. If they're acting in that position, every year they have to file no earlier than September the 1st, no later than December the 31st, a management certificate, very defined what it looks like, with the county clerk, so that everybody, remember 13002, property file, notice for everybody, that everybody can say, who do I contact for that Wildflower HOA? Because I want to know what I don't know. Then you can go to the county clerk, or you can go to your title company, or go somewhere and get that. Well, that's what they don't do. Those are all curative things. You can fix all of those. The problem is the IRS is not a very easy party to deal with. So you miss 4 or 5 of their tax returns, they're looking for somebody's skin. And that happens. And so what we've learned to do is just let them stay defunct, let them go into expiration, and then we will refile and rededicate them under the old documents with new dates. And we've done that dozens of times and made people really happy. The IRS has got big fines attached to everything they do. EPA's got big fines attached to everything they do. TCEQ's got big fines attached to everything they do. It's kind of crazy. So you got to have these annual meetings, or else you must adopt and record these policies about the do's and the don'ts, and you must make that available to everybody that wants to see it. Doesn't matter if they own or don't own or can't read. If they say they want a copy, you got to provide it to them. Now, you can choose a number of different ways to do it, whether it be U.S. Postal Service, which I absolutely have no respect for, or you can hand it to them, or you can email it to them, or you can get Scott to deliver them to them on the way home. I don't know. Pick a lane on the deal. But at the same time, you can't deny somebody copies if they request them, especially if you do it in writing. That's where you get in trouble. This is really kind of a can of worms. A lot of lawyers like to hide these things where nobody gets to see them and nobody gets to read them until they come down and pay that lawyer some of money. They've stopped all that practice back in 2011. If somebody's behind on their payments, behind on their assessments, behind on fines, whatever, you must extend them an offer of a payment plan. Now, you don't have to do it more than 18 months, but you can't do it for less than 3 months. Payment plans are required simply by them putting something in writing, whether it be a cocktail napkin or a formal letter or whatever. You must honor those requests. Again, that's found over in 0062. Application of payments, they're behind on their payments. They owe for 3 years, but they run up a huge sum of money in legal fees and late fees and fines, mowings, forced mowings. We can mow your yard if you don't mow it. Just tell me you're not going to mow it. Watch this. we'll come. Now, we won't do anything with the front yard, but we'll darn sure come on your property and mow your yard, given proper notice. So you have to apply that to the assessments. What is it? Must apply assessments and must record this with the county clerk how you do it, so that everybody's out there. That's again in that book that I showed you a little bit that we do for everybody. That right to vote, if you haven't paid your assessments, you do not lose your right to vote, period. Voting, there's lots of ways to vote. You can do absentee, you can do electronic, you can do proxies, you can come down and do it at my office, you can send it with somebody, but when voting opens, that closes that opportunity for those people to come in. We have to keep these for 5 years. You're subject to reviews. They have to hire somebody that's a county official to come in and do a recount. Never had that done. Whoever opposes it has to pay for it. Lots of rules in this recount business. Resale certificates. This is where a lot of people get jammed up, especially real estate agents. There are 2 forms that are mandatory use. Many people simply do not fill them out. And the title companies will send it to us, or they won't send it to us, or they'll monkey us around and make us drag out when they're going to pay us. We go chase the real estate agent down for failure to use a mandatory use form. There's one of those forms, 36-8. This one talks about who pays for, but it's still a mandatory use and how we get that information. You must use this form. Resale certificates are only good for 60 days. Some people can charge you for a new one. We give you additional 60 days if you request one. HOAs can ask for prepayment of these if you so choose, but they can't cash your check until they deliver. Solar panels are no longer considered not usable. The legislature fought that and fought that and fought that. The federal government said we want you to use solar panels. If they want them, they can certainly have them. This is the problem that's solved with one of my trying to get people to change the CC&Rs. If you own an adjacent lot, you want to build a house across that line, you can now do it. Or if you own an adjacent lot, you can build things like playscapes and pools and garages and those kind of things. If those are temporary and you want to sell just the lot, you have to remove all those improvements.
Bill, can we go back to that and talk about resale certificate versus transfer fee and the other language in that addendum? That
Sure.
Please.
Now, the difference between resale and transfer, I can't get it to do it.
And all the other things that they call transfer?
There's a lot of names for transfers.
Processing.
Initial assessments, I see them called all kinds of things. The transfer fee is how I define somebody buying into the equity or the goodwill established in the neighborhood. Make sense? In other words, these people have created a neighborhood. You decided to purchase a home in this neighborhood versus that neighborhood because this one has an HOA and you can see markedly things are better. There's no junk cars, there's no boats in the driveways, whatever is your compelling reason to do something, then that's what a transfer fee does. It buys into that goodwill. A resale certificate is a function. That's documents, things you have to do that puts the HOA management company on notice that this lady doesn't own 123 Main Street. It's now been sold to this lady. Does that kind of make any sense to anybody but me? Very distinct, 2 different things. They all kind of get mixed together. There's so much. How many of you go to closing and you see 80 pages and it's just a blur? Sign here, sign here, sign here. I've had a title company, a big giant German woman ran this title company, and she said, "There's nothing you can say or do that'll change anything you're going to sign today. Sign right here." That's just how.
Is a community enhancement fee the same thing as?
Just another name for you buying into that equity or a transfer fee. Now, there are some transfer fees that have been federally outlawed. If you hear that, they say, well, you can't do that. Right and wrong. It's 2 answers. The federal government said that if a developer comes along and puts a transfer fee in place every time a lot is sold, it's $100. That's illegal. That money has to go to the HOA. Those developers were doing it so they had a stream of income for the next 100 years. And often you can't find them. And then what do? Can't sell the property? You got a prima facie defect on the title because you don't know who these players are. So the feds got us, TAR had a lot to do with that. Let me see if I can, more on resales, solar panels I talked about, adjoining lots I talked about, generators, that's mostly down at the coast. If you've got a generator, they can't prohibit you from using it, period. Now they can make you hide it, they can make you disguise it, they can make you do certain things, but they can't prohibit you from having generators. Propane tanks are the same way. Dig them and bore them and all those kind of things. This is a real problem in Williamson County for me. Y'all got a legacy tree law. You cut down one tree, you got to plant 10 that equal the size of that one. Legislature said, wait a minute. If those trees are a problem, a threat to the house, and I put up here on purpose, harken back to the Bastrop blaze. If you can show beyond any reasonable person that those trees are a hazard to your house if they catch fire, you can remove them. In the Williamson County, you just have to work it out with them. Get a good lawyer.
In Cedar Park, in some areas, if you want to take a tree down, they'll charge you up to $5,000.
But this law changes some of that. So anyway, that legacy tree law was attacked by the legislature. This is the best thing they came up with. 202.
Can the trees disappear in the middle of the night?
That's how most of them go down. Good point. Great point. Almost done here. Going to get to the...
I don't like that one.
I see it change here. There it is. We now have the ability under the 84th legislature to send you a verified mail. That's not what it is. It'll still say certified across it. We no longer use the green card. You see those mailmen with that little thing in their hand where they scan it and stick it in your mailbox? It's delivered. You say, well, I never got it. Remember, son? So what? I'm going to go to the internet and show where the mailman said he put it in your mailbox, and you've been put on notice, and the clock's ticking. Legislature helped us out with this. Here's the juicy part. This is the part I've been promising you now for quite some time. When things go wrong, they can get real wrong. To enforce restrictive covenants, a person must simply be an interested party. Right out of their handbook, quote unquote. And there's a famous lawsuit, Hemphill versus Case. Venue must be the county venue. You can't go get a lawyer or get a judge in Lubbock County to sue somebody in Williamson County. They're more favorable to this kind of stuff. Can't work that. Trial issues must be resolved under deed restrictions that are unique to whatever the claim is. This is right out of their handbook, including damages and evidence. That can result in a penalty. Here's where it gets real juicy. $200 a day. That's how that lady owes us $124,000. She won't stop. She's still got the chickens. She won't pay. Hope she enjoys those chickens. Deed restrictions are liberally construed by the court to give effect to their purpose and intent. It says very clearly in mine, this is used as a motivation for you to behave and to punish you if you do things that you've agreed not to do. You have signed a document that says you won't do them. Exercise of discretionary authority by a property owner association is presumed to be reasonable unless the court determines by preponderance of the evidence, the evidence, that this is arbitrary and capricious or discriminatory. Pretty straightforward. If I'm picking on you, I can't do it. So, there's lots of other things out there. You can't prohibit satellite dishes. That's a federal law, FCC. Parking, we can't tow your car because that's a private public street out there, but we can charge you $200 a day. We go out there in the middle of the night and do that for a lot of our HOAs. Landscaping, you can't use some things. Choice of colors, that was that yellow door story from Houston. Consanguinity, anybody want to take a shot at what that means? That's all that relative stuff. When you get an HOA and you got a husband and wife, brother and sister or whatever, it either goes really good or it goes really bad because they don't like each other no matter what. Consanguinity is all those layers of family down to the third level of consanguinity and more. consanguinity. Third layer, cousins, brothers, sisters, fathers, uncles, aunts, grandfathers, first cousins, immediate family. Cannot serve many boards. You cannot serve on it at the same time someone else that fits inside of that definition. And my reasoning is they come in there and it's just a show and tell who's got the loudest voice. And we get derailed and distracted, and so we just say you can't do it.
Any limit on how many members of a certain family could live in one house?
That's going to be defined to Georgetown, Williamson County, those kind of things.
Okay.
In Bell County, 4 of the cities that I work in have a 3 bloodline rule,
Okay.
and that prohibits all that
Definitely.
multiple.
Yeah, okay.
What happens when in a college area?
Well, there's some carve-outs. Certainly, Mary Hardin Baylor, your university here, Southwest. There's carve-outs for each one of those. But remember, they have their own police department, and they got all kinds of rules for them. But
The HOA rules say that they have to be related by blood. That still apply?
no, we don't get into that at all. We let the city deal with those problems.
Are the county?
Consanguinity is about who's running the show, the board of directors, that kind of stuff. Yes, sir.
So I get the question a lot, but I've never seen the actual, like, people wanna buy a lot. I wanna make sure there's no restriction on the time I have before I have to build it. Do you ever see that?
Oh yeah, and what that in my mind exposes the fragility, if you will, of the developer, is they want their money. And so I'm going to ask for a variance or I'm not going to buy it. I'm buying this for my retirement home. I'm 50 years old. I'm not planning on retiring anytime soon.
And so you use you for that when you see it?
That's what I do. And again, that goes back to that getting that lawyer involved and getting them to write the correct language there and ask for a variance. But I want you to read those covenants. Sit down and read them line by line if you have to. Get somebody to read them for you. Get somebody you trust to look for the oddity things. Highlight them, because you have agreed forevermore to whatever you've signed for, unless there's a case law or the legislature preempts a lot of these things, null and void, those kind of things. I'm yours, folks. I got to be in court at 1:30, and it takes me about 40 minutes to get there.
What's your contact information?
My email address is bill@accentres.com. My cell number, and here's how this plays out. First, I want you to tell me when you call me, here's who I am. Because if you don't tell me, I'm going to ask you, who are you? Because I get a lot of crank phone calls. I mean, a lot. Tell me who you are, and then I'm going to say to you, if I answer, can I call you back in 10 minutes? Because this is an answer. It's going to take longer than 12 seconds. If you leave a message, I assure you I will always call you back. 254-770-9600.
And the name of your company is?
Accent. I'm 1966. My mom started Accent Real Estate Services. For 37 years, she bought a Century 21 franchise, and I hated them. And I got rid of them. So we've been in the same location since 1971. And you're all welcome. If you need an office, if you need a restroom, a cup of coffee, fax machine, computer, whatever, you're always welcome to stop. We're at the corner of 57th and the South Loop, down by the mall.
I know where I'm moving.
In what town?
What's that?
I know where I'm moving.
Come on. Come on. No, seriously, if you get somebody in Bell County and you want to drive back down here to type a contract or to look up something or whatever, my staff will know. If you say Scott's name, or what's her name? Avis's name. We will move heaven and earth to help you. And if you need it after hours, call me on my cell.
So, we have a situation in my neighborhood, which is not an HOA neighborhood, where there's an ordinance, the city ordinance, that is, not being enforced. And code enforcement has been told not to enforce it. But if you had that in an HOA neighborhood, who has Who's the hierarchy? Is the HOA higher or is the covenant ordinance?
Well, the city can't stop me from enforcing a covenant. So in as much as they say, you know, you can park, you can cover driveways, you can do whatever you want to do, we don't care. If I come over there, I'm gonna give you a ticket. Now I can't tow your car. I can put a sticker on the driver's window. I can't go up on your property. But after I do the third warning comes with a $200 per day bill. How long are you gonna leave that car parked? And then you say, well, you can't do that. Well, guess what? I can read the papers in Harris County. I can take your house away from you. Now, I don't want to do that. Nobody wants to be unreasonable, but I darn sure can. You want to be hateful? I'll show you what hateful looks like. I got the lawyers. And the judges all know me. The judges applaud me because I don't put up with this stuff. They don't like it. They hate it, most of them. There's some that do. They hate it when they have to come in there and kowtow to somebody complaining about the next door neighbor's dog. Or chickens. Or whatever.
Or deer.
Yeah.
You know, we lived at the lake.
I know.
The deer drive me crazy. They're just big rats.
They are.
That's all they are. Move.
Because people come in and be.
Yeah.
No, I don't be right. They live in
Yeah.
my backyard.
Yeah.
But I have a split rail fence
One more question.
that they jump over. And when they jump over, they knock the rail down. Guess who I get a notice from? The management company.
I bet.
We are fining you $25.
Now here's the problem with what she just used as an example. To me, that's those crummy management companies looking for an income stream, because I'll bet you all the money in my back pocket that there's no way that money goes to the HOA, it goes to that management company.
We have time for one more question.
What's his last name?
Jones.
Okay, so if you have deeds, who sets up that HOA? You go from deeds to HOA. Who sets up the HOA?
I don't know where I lost you in that, but everything is done by the declarant. In the beginning, there was a void.
Right.
In the beginning, there was no HOA.
Right.
And the dedication, the declarant, the developer sets all that up. And he either says yes or no. To have an HOA after the sunset and all the homes are built, I've never heard of that. I've heard people talk like that, but I've never heard it.
Oh, okay, well, we've got that then.
I'll
All
take
right. Thanks so much, Bill. Let's give it up for him.
Thank you.
We are going to move